Howdy, and welcome to a special edition of the Virtual Book Festival recorded on March 24th, 2020. This is produced by Book Festival Network, a division of Dear Texas and Dear Indie. This show is sponsored by Authors Marketing Guild. We're a membership-owned company that helps authors learn how to market and sell themselves. Also by IndieLector.store, the only bookstore that offers up to 80% of its sales to authors directly. And produced by Dear Indie and Dear Texas, where we drop everything and read both Texas and Indie. In this episode, we introduce you to Steve Friedman.
Sounds good. All right. Good evening. A couple of years ago, I retired from Shell and announced that my big project during retirement was I wanted to write a book. And I shared with my soon-to-be former coworkers that my book was going to be about, it was going to be a memoir and about my life as an introvert in an extrovert's world. And the response I got back from every one of them was, "Oh, you're not an introvert. You know, I've known you for years. We've gone out to dinner. We've worked together for years. There's no way you're an introvert." And those words really stuck with me because it made me realize how much of a facade I was putting up at work. Now, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the people at work, but the sign of many introverts is we get energy from within. There's a misperception that we don't really like to go socialize or talk to people, and that's not true, but it is true generally that we need those social interactions in certain doses with certain people, and extended interaction or can be overwhelming. And at least that was the case for me. And what I found was as I worked at Shell in a variety of different roles that became more and more dependent upon social engagement, that I became less and less comfortable and less confident. But I put up the facade because that's what the role required. It was important for me to provide for my family. I had pride in the job that I did, but it stressed me out to no end. And every year and every assignment, it seemed to get more stressful. And so when I heard from my coworkers that they could not believe that I was an introvert, it made me realize the facade I was putting up and the stress I was truly putting myself through and having to manage that for 3 decades. It also made me realize the misperception of introversion. And as I was mentioning, I think a lot of people think introverts are recluses, loners, and antisocials, and that's just not true. There are extremes, right? And so some people may fall into that category, but generally introverts like a lot of the same things that extroverts do. They just may like them in different doses and may need a little bit of time to collect themselves and rebuild energy in the middle of the day or after a long day in certain circumstances. And that was what I felt. So for me, I continued with this project to write my first book, and I started a couple of years ago. And the result was my first book, which just came out in the last couple of weeks, In Search of Courage, an introvert's struggle with addictive behavior. And so I started the project really as an opportunity to understand more about myself. Those misperceptions that a lot of people have about introversion, I had a lot of those misperceptions. I was subject to the same societal norms that most people hear about, believe, and live by in many cases. And so the project was really an effort for me to understand more about myself, my past, my experiences at work. Why did I feel this way? Why have I really, since my childhood, felt a bit abnormal? And was that okay? And how could I build better coping skills? Because as the book title implies, I built a lot of unhealthy coping skills, addictive behaviors during my years, and they're noted throughout the book, but a lot of kind of dangerous experiences, dangerous for myself, certainly for my health, for my family. And so I struggled oftentimes to figure out how to do that. And so my project was that attempt to try and understand that better myself. And along the way, I learned so much about that. But I realized that for my own personal benefit, it could not be an effort that just was very superficial or just scratched the surface. So for me, I wanted to dig deep. So I tried to peel that onion back. It took me quite a while to write the first draft and edits as well, largely because I just wanted to keep peeling that back. I read a lot of other memoirs. I worked with coaches to try and understand how I could find some sources of the issues that I was dealing with, and how there were connecting threads in my life about introversion and the struggles I had at work. And so as I went through that, it really helped me to understand that what I was dealing with was as normal as anybody else in many cases. But it was my story that I had struggled with, and was finally coming to a point where I could reconcile with that and move on as a better person. The other thing that I realized through the project, which was perhaps even more surprising, especially for an introvert, is I realized the connection with other people. So I realized as I was working on the book and beginning to publish the book, and opened up my blog, which is beyondintroversion.com, and connected with other introverts out in society, that many people were challenged with the same sort of misperceptions by society as a whole, by each individual, by their spouse, their coworkers, their bosses. And so I've really had a very incredible experience of connecting with other people, hearing their stories, comparing stories. Many people I found are at different points in their own journey. So some people they don't even understand if they're an introvert or not, and they've not heard the term, frankly. And those are not just young people, but they could be older people that have gone for decades trying to deal with this, much like myself. And then they have other people along that journey have kind of gone through that point of understanding what introversion in general is, but really adhering to a lot of society's negative connotations. And for me, in my own journey, and I found for many other people as well, that the story is about understanding the strengths that we as introverts have, and that those are as viable strengths as anything else. Introverts tend to be, I hate to stereotype, but they tend to be more creative, more analytical, more of a balanced thinker, and oftentimes are very loyal as well. They don't necessarily crave the spotlight, but they do want their voice to be heard in the right environment. And so for me and many others, just going through that journey of understanding that there are strengths that we bring to the table, and that maybe I need to adjust how I work at work, or how other people see me at work. And that's a difficult conversation to have, or at home as well. But somehow I have gifts, and everybody has gifts to bring to the people that we love, that we know, that we work with. And without a balanced conversation of everybody's gifts, then the workplace is suboptimal and relationships are suboptimal. And, I think that's recognition has helped me, and I see many other people that it's starting to help them to realize they're a valued part of society, and they have a lot to contribute to the discussion and find their own voice. And so my story, In Search of Courage, is my memoir about that. And what I found through discussion as I've worked to market and publish the book is the opportunity to share the stories and find other people that take a bit of homage in those stories, and realizing that they're not alone in their own journey. And so that's my story. My book, In Search of Courage, is certainly available on Indie Lecture Store. So I would welcome everybody to join, to check it out on Indie Lecture. It's also available, as is more information about my story, my book, my background, on my website, beyondintroversion.com. and I put out a weekly blog every Wednesday about introversion, different topics, introversion in the workplace, introversion and coping with some of the issues that we have in today's world and so forth. So would also encourage everyone to check out my blog and stay tuned for more opportunities along the lines of coping and excelling with our own introversion.
And Steve, speaking of other opportunities, are you working on a presentation or some kind of course or something that will help people guide through that process?
So one of the things that I've, this whole thing just sort of evolves based on my learnings and my interaction with other people. And so, as I mentioned, I've been putting a blog out every week for about 9 months, and it's a bit of a sequel to the book, right? So my book is my background. The blog is more of in the here and now. How, and again, I try and make it as revealing as possible because I think people can associate with stories that have some depth and that touch a chord with different people. And so the blog has been that sequel to help to share coping skills and to share the challenges and the great opportunities we have to put our voice out. So I'm formulating that next step for me. I would envision a book later this year that kind of pulls all that together and is a sequel, not as much from a memoir perspective as for introverts and how to cope and excel with their own skills. That book would likely be accompanied by certainly more speaking opportunities. And I'm not a therapist. I'm not really seeking to be a therapist, but I just want to share that word with the introvert community as well as, frankly, with extroverts. And I've talked to workplaces about the opportunity to sit down and talk with them. So I think there's certainly more in the planning stages for the rest of 2020.
Great. And if you would, please give the website so that people know how to get a hold of you again.
Sure. It's Beyond Introversion, BeyondIntroversion.com.
Authors Marketing Guild is a membership-owned organization designed to help authors succeed and learn how to better market and sell themselves and their books. Join us at authorsmarketingguild.com and receive so many benefits you'll wonder why you didn't join sooner. That's authorsmarketingguild.com.
Welcome to IndieLector.store, an online bookstore where the discriminating reader can find award-winning books. IndieLector.store is not a big corporation, so we can give up to 80% of the sales directly to the author. Help us support them by buying a great book at IndieLector.store. The 5th Annual Authors Marketing Event. 2 days of live seminars in marketing for authors. The only organization that certifies authors in marketing. Live and free to the first 100 authors registered. Sponsored by Bubblish, empowering entrepreneurs, and Indie Lector Store, paying authors for their fair share. Head to www.2020.authorsmarketingguild.com today.